The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with angry voices as Ambassador Jake Morrison sat quietly at the human table. His gray hair showed his 50 years of service, and his tired eyes had seen too many debates like this one. Around him, creatures from dozens of worlds argued in their strange languages, while translation devices worked to make sense of it all. Chancellor Vexstar rose from his crystal seat, his body gleaming under the artificial lights. The Zelonian leader pointed one of his forearms at Jake and spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "The humans have done it again," he said, his words echoing through the chamber. "They have broken our laws and acted without permission." Jake knew what this was about. 3 days ago, Captain Roy Jackson had taken his ship Defiant to Tau Ceti. The planet's sun was throwing out deadly radiation that would kill everyone on the surface. Roy had loaded 12,000 people onto his ship and brought them to safety. It was the right thing to do, but the Council had not given permission first. 12,000 lives were saved, Jake said, standing up slowly. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the tiredness in it. "Should we have let them die while waiting for your committees to meet?" Vexstar's crystal body flashed red with anger. "The law is clear. No species may act in another's territory without Council approval. The humans think they are above our rules." Other voices joined in. Senator Kralmuth of the Regelian Trade Union stood on his 6 legs and waved his tentacles. "Last month, human ships brought medicine to the plague worlds without asking us first. Before that, they stopped the Vorthan pirates from attacking our cargo ships. They never wait for permission." Jake listened to the same complaints he had heard for years. Every time humans helped someone, the Council found a rule they had broken. Every time they saved lives, there was a law they had ignored. The bureaucracy had grown so thick that getting permission to help people took longer than the people had left to live. He thought about Lisa Hayes, the captain who had watched a transport full of families burn in space because the Council took 3 days to decide if she could rescue them. He remembered Dr. Ben Carter, who had the cure for a deadly disease, but could not share it because the Council worried about cultural contamination. These were good people who wanted to help, but the laws stopped them every time. "Ambassador Morrison," came a new voice. High Counselor Zithron of the Arcanian Federation floated in his energy bubble, his ancient face stern with disapproval. "Your species joined our council 50 years ago. You agreed to follow our laws. You cannot pick and choose which rules to obey." Jake had heard these words before, in this same room, dozens of times. He looked around at the faces staring at him. Some looked angry, some looked bored, and a few looked worried. None of them seemed to care that 12,000 people were alive because a human captain chose to act instead of wait. "We joined the Council because we believed it represented something good," Jake said. "We thought it was about protecting life and helping those in need. Instead, we found a system that values paperwork more than people." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted in languages Jake could not understand, but the translation devices made their meaning clear. They called humans arrogant, dangerous, and disruptive. They said humans did not respect authority or understand civilization. Jake waited for the noise to die down. He had made his decision during the long flight to this meeting. Earth's government had given him full authority to act as he saw fit. The other human colonies had sent similar messages. They were tired of watching people die while bureaucrats debated. 50 years ago, we joined your council with hope," Jake said, his voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. "We believed we were joining something noble. We thought we would work together to make the galaxy a better place for all life." He paused and looked at each of the major representatives. "Instead, we found committees that take weeks to approve emergency aid. We found laws that make it illegal to save lives without permission. We found a system that cares more about procedure than preventing suffering. Vexta's crystal body flashed bright red. You dare to lecture us about law and order? Your species has been nothing but trouble since you arrived. You interfere where you do not belong. You ignore our traditions and customs. We saved lives, Jake said simply. Every time you complain about human actions, it is because we saved lives. We gave medicine to the sick. We rescued people from disasters. We stopped pirates and criminals. If these things are crimes in your system, then your system is broken. The hall fell silent. Even the translator devices seemed to pause. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was old-fashioned, made from real earth trees, and it bore the seals of every human world. I hereby announce the immediate withdrawal of humanity from the Galactic Council, Jake said, his voice steady and clear. We are ending all treaties, agreements, and obligations effective immediately. Human ships will evacuate all Council space within 72 hours. The silence stretched on for long moments. Then Counselor Zethron laughed, a sound like wind. Through empty caves, you think you can threaten us? You are one species among 47. The galaxy will not miss your disruption. Jake folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. We are not making threats. We are simply leaving. Humanity will find its own path among the stars. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the great hall erupted in voices again, but this time they sounded different. Some were still angry, but others seemed confused or worried. A few representatives tried to follow him, calling out questions, but Jake did not stop outside the council chamber. Jake activated his communicator. This is Morrison, he said. Send the signal. Across the galaxy, human ships received a coded transmission. Within hours, colonies began shutting down their operations. Research stations went dark. Trade posts closed their doors. Military bases evacuated their personnel. The withdrawal was swift and complete. On distant worlds, alien friends watched in confusion as their human neighbors packed up and left. Some tried to convince them to stay, but the humans were polite but firm. They had made their choice. Within 3 days, humanity had vanished from known galactic civilization. They left behind empty buildings, abandoned equipment, and a galaxy that was about to learn just how much it had depended on the species it had taken for granted. Jake Morrison's ship was the last to leave Council space. As it jumped to hyperspace, he looked back at the station where he had spent so many years fighting for permission to do the right thing. He felt no anger, only sadness for what could have been. Set course for the rendezvous point, he told his pilot. It's time to build something better. The emergency session of the Galactic Council met 48 hours after the humans left. High Counselor Zethran floated in his energy bubble at the center of the Great Hall, looking pleased with himself. Around him, representatives from 46 species took their seats with expressions ranging from satisfaction to concern. Order, order, Zethran called out, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber. We are here to discuss the human departure and plan our response. Chancellor Vextar's crystal body gleamed as he stood to speak. Good riddance, he said, his voice sharp like breaking glass. The humans were nothing but trouble. They're constant. Interference made it impossible to maintain proper order. Now we can return to civilized governance. Many heads nodded in agreement. Senator Kralmoth waved his tentacles in approval. The humans never understood that rules exist for good reasons. They acted like children, always rushing to help without thinking of the consequences. But not everyone seemed happy. Trade Administrator Clix sat quietly at his small table, studying a datapad with growing concern. His 4 eyes moved rapidly across columns of numbers that made less sense each time he looked at them. Something was wrong with the shipping reports, but he could not figure out what. Administrator Clicks, Zethron called out. Do you have anything to add about the trade implications of the human departure? Clicks looked up, his face troubled. Honored Counselor, I am seeing some irregularities in our shipping manifests. 17 major trade routes have gone completely silent. All of them were routes that human ships either managed or protected. So we will find new ships, Vexstar said dismissively. There are plenty of species willing to take over those routes. It is not that simple, Click said, his voice growing more worried. These routes go through dangerous sectors. The humans provided security that other species cannot match. Without their protection, many of these routes may become unusable. Zethran waved a dismissive hand. We managed trade for thousands of years before the humans arrived. We will manage just fine without them. On the medical world of Sanctum, Dr. Thelmos was discovering that managing without humans would not be as easy as the Council believed. The tall, thin doctor stood in his laboratory, staring at empty workstations where human colleagues had been just days before. His multiple arms moved nervously as he tried to access medical files that suddenly seemed incomplete. Computer, show me the synthesis process for Ketracell healing compound, he said to the medical database. Error, the computer replied. File access restricted. Human authorization required. Dr. Thelmos felt a cold sensation in his stomach. He tried another search. Computer, display research data on Terran immune system compatibility. Error, database section unavailable. Human research staff credentials expired. With growing panic, the doctor began searching through every medical file he could access. What he found made him sick with worry. Nearly 30% of their most advanced medical knowledge came from human research. Worse, several critical medications could only be made using processes that human scientists had developed. The human medical staff had not just worked at the hospital. They had been the foundation that everything else was built on. Dr. Thelmos activated his communicator with shaking hands. This is Dr. Thelmos to Council Medical Authority. We have a serious emergency. Back in the council chamber, General Vorgak of the Defense Force was having his own troubling discoveries. The massive warrior had spread tactical reports across his table and was studying them with the eye of someone who had fought in dozens of battles. What he saw made his blood run cold. Counselor Zethron, the general, interrupted the ongoing debate about trade routes. I need to report a serious security concern. Can it wait, General? Zethron asked impatiently. We are discussing economic matters. No, it cannot wait, Vorgak said, standing to his full height. I have been reviewing our defense capabilities since the human departure. The situation is worse than anyone realized. The chamber fell quiet as the general activated a holographic display. It showed the galaxy with shipping lanes, military bases, and patrol routes marked in different colors. Large sections of the map were now dark. The humans were not just participants in our joint defense operations, Vorgak explained. In many sectors, they were the primary force. They handled logistics, intelligence gathering, and rapid response across multiple regions. Without them, we have massive gaps in our coverage. Vexstar's crystal body flickered with annoyance. Surely our own forces can cover those areas. Our forces are already stretched thin, the general replied grimly. The humans took on responsibilities. That would require doubling our military budget to replace. And that assumes we can find species willing to work in the dangerous sectors that humans patrolled. While the council debated, reports were coming in from across the galaxy that confirmed everyone's worst fears. On the mining world of Kepler Station, Foreman Daltok watched his productivity reports with growing alarm. The human security teams that had protected his workers from pirate attacks were gone. Already, 3 mining ships had failed to report in from the Outer Rim territories. "Send a message to the Council," Daltok told his assistant. "Request immediate military protection for our operations." "Sir," the assistant replied nervously, "we are the 15th mining operation to make that request today. The Council Defense Force says they do not have enough ships to protect everyone." The Galactic Stock Exchange was in chaos. Trader Pixon watched his screens in horror as stock prices fell like stones into deep water. Companies that had built their entire business around human technology were collapsing. Supply chains that depended on human logistics were breaking down. Industries that used human innovations were shutting down. "This cannot be happening," Pixon muttered as he watched another major corporation declare bankruptcy. They were just one species among many, but the numbers did not lie. Humans had not just been participants in galactic civilization. They had been the glue that held much of it together. Their ships carried cargo through dangerous space. Their soldiers protected trade routes from pirates. Their doctors had trained medical staff across dozens of worlds. Their engineers had designed and maintained systems that other species now could not operate. Back in the council chamber, emergency reports were arriving every few minutes. Pirate attacks had increased by 200% in just 2 days. Medical facilities were reporting shortages of critical medicines. Industrial accidents were happening on worlds where human safety experts had maintained complex systems. "Perhaps," said a small voice from the back of the chamber, "we should try to contact the humans and ask them to reconsider." The suggestion came from Councillor Melandra of the peaceful Centauri Republic. She was young for a council member and had always spoken favorably of human contributions. Zethran's energy bubble flickered with irritation. "We do not negotiate with species that break their commitments and abandon their responsibilities." "But what if we need them more than they need us?" Melandra asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Around the chamber, representatives, who had been celebrating the human departure just hours before, were beginning to look worried. The reports kept coming in, each one worse than the last. Trade Administrator Clicks stood up again, his datapad trembling in his hands. "Honored counselors, I have more shipping reports. In the past 6 hours, we have lost contact with 43 cargo vessels, 12 passenger transports, and 6 medical supply ships. All were traveling on routes previously protected by human patrols." The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the translation devices. Slowly, the reality of what they had lost was beginning to sink in. The humans had not just been troublesome rule breakers. They had been the backbone of galactic civilization, quietly handling the dangerous and difficult jobs that kept everyone else safe and fed and healthy. And now they were gone. 1 month after the humans left, Captain Zorthek of the merchant vessel Star Wind sent out his final distress call before the pirates destroyed his ship. He had been carrying medical supplies to the colony world of New Haven when 3 pirate vessels surrounded him in the Vega sector. In the old days, human patrol ships would have responded to his emergency signal within minutes. Now, the nearest Council Defense Force ship was 6 hours away. The pirates had grown bold without human interference. What used to be safe shipping lanes were now hunting grounds for criminals who knew the help would not come quickly. The Red Nebula Syndicate, a criminal organization that had been kept in check by human intelligence networks, launched attacks on 6 major shipping hubs in the same week. Without the human spy networks to warn of their movements, each attack came as a complete surprise. On the industrial world of Mechanicus, Chief Engineer Nalphis stood in the main power plant, staring at warning lights that flashed red across every control panel. The fusion reactors that powered the entire planet had been upgraded with human safety systems 50 years ago. Now those systems were failing, and none of the remaining engineers understood how to fix them. The plasma flow is becoming unstable, reported his assistant, a young technician named Velkar. The human-designed containment protocols are not responding to our commands. Nalthis wiped sweat from his forehead with one of his forearms. The reactors had been built by his people originally, but the humans had made them safer and more efficient. They had integrated their technology so completely with the original systems that removing the human components would mean shutting down power to 12 billion people. Try bypassing the human safety controls, Nalthis ordered, knowing it was dangerous, but seeing no other choice. Sir, if we do that, and something goes wrong, the entire reactor could explode, Velkar said, his voice shaking with fear. And if we do nothing, the reactor will shut down anyway, and 12 billion people will freeze to death. Nalthis replied grimly. We should have learned how their systems worked, instead of just depending on them to run everything. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, Farmer Kellenoth watched his crops dying in fields that had been green and healthy just weeks before. The soil treatment programs that had doubled crop yields across the galaxy had been developed by human agricultural scientists. Without them, the enhanced growing methods were failing one by one. The wheat is turning brown, his daughter reported as she returned from checking the eastern fields. The corn is no better. Even the vegetables that used to grow easily are withering. Kellenoth knelt down and picked up a handful of soil. It looked different somehow, less rich than it had been. The human scientists had explained once that they had introduced beneficial microorganisms that helped plants grow better. Those tiny life forms were dying without the human-made nutrients that kept them alive. Send a message to the agricultural authority, Kellenoth told his daughter. Tell them we need the human soil treatments, or we will lose the entire harvest. But the agricultural authority had no good news to give. Similar reports were coming in from farming worlds across the galaxy. The human scientists who had revolutionized agriculture were gone, and their knowledge had died with their departure. Worlds that had been able to feed twice their population were facing the possibility of famine. Dr. Thelmos on Sanctum had his own growing nightmare. 3 different plague outbreaks had started on separate worlds in the past 2 weeks. These were diseases that had been easily controlled with human-developed vaccines and treatments. Now they were spreading unchecked because the medical community had depended entirely on human research to fight them. Doctor, we have another emergency transmission from Rigel 7, his assistant reported. The plague there has reached the capital city. They are requesting immediate medical assistance. Dr. Thelmos looked at the empty laboratory where human researchers had once worked day and night to develop new treatments. What can we send them? We barely understand how their medicines work, much less how to make new ones. The communication network that connected the galaxy was also beginning to fail. The quantum entanglement protocols that allowed instant communication across vast distances had been largely developed and maintained by human technicians. Without them, entire sectors were losing contact with the rest of civilization. On the Elfaven mining station Deep Core 7, Station Commander Brixtall had not heard from the outside galaxy in 10 days. The communication array that connected his station to the galactic network had broken down, and his technicians could not fix it. The human engineer who had maintained the system had left with all the others, taking his knowledge with him. Sir, we are completely cut off, reported his communications officer. We do not even know if our supply ships are still coming. Brixtall stared out at the empty space around his station. 3,000 miners depended on supply ships to bring them food and equipment. If those ships had been attacked by pirates or lost to system failures, everyone on the station could die before anyone knew they were in trouble. The casualty reports were getting worse every day. Space accidents that would have been prevented by human safety systems were killing hundreds of people. Pirate attacks were claiming entire ships and crews. Industrial failures were causing explosions and toxic spills on worlds where human engineers had maintained complex safety networks. General Vorgak reviewed the latest reports with growing despair. In just 1 month, over 500,000 people had died in incidents that could have been prevented if the humans were still around. Pirates had destroyed 47 cargo ships and 16 passenger transports. Industrial accidents had killed 30,000 workers. Disease outbreaks were claiming thousands more each day. How many ships do we have available for emergency? Response? The general asked his aide. 63 vessels across the entire galaxy, sir, came the grim reply. The humans were providing rapid response capability that we never realized we were depending on. The general studied a tactical map showing the locations of every Council Defense Force ship. They were spread so thin that most sectors had no protection at all. In the old days, human ships had filled those gaps, but their commanders had never made a big show of it. They had just quietly done what needed to be done. Chancellor Vextar received the casualty reports in his Crystal Palace. On the Zilonian homeworld, the numbers made even his crystalline form dim with worry. 500,000 dead in just 1 month, and the crisis was getting worse every day. The humans had been the immune system of galactic civilization, fighting off threats and solving problems, before most people even knew they existed. Perhaps, his advisor suggested carefully, we should try to find the humans and negotiate their return. Vextar's crystal body flashed with anger, but it was anger at himself as much as anyone else. Find them, he ordered. Send out every scout ship we have. Search every system if necessary. The galaxy is dying without them. But finding the humans would prove to be much harder than anyone expected. They had vanished as completely as if they had never existed, leaving behind only empty buildings and the growing realization that galactic civilization could not survive without them. Chancellor Vextar stood in the command center of his flagship as it emerged from hyperspace near the Sol system. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was dying piece by piece. The search fleet he commanded included 200 ships from 20 different species, all desperately looking for any trace of humanity. Sir, we are detecting the Sol system ahead, reported his navigation officer. Scanners show multiple planets, but no signs of technological civilization. Vextar moved to the viewing screen and stared at the yellow star that had been humanity's home. Earth appeared on the display, a blue and green world that looked peaceful and beautiful. But as their sensors gathered more data, the truth became clear. The planet was empty. Life signs? Vextar asked, though he already knew the answer. Vegetation and animal life are normal, sir, but no intelligent life detected. No cities, no technology, no artificial structures of any kind. It is as if humans never lived there at all. The search team that landed on Earth found something even more disturbing. The humans had not destroyed their cities or left them to decay. They had carefully dismantled everything, removing every trace of their technology while leaving the natural world untouched. Parks and forests covered areas where great cities had once stood. Rivers ran clean where industrial centers had operated for centuries. Sir, we found something, called out Scout Leader Trixnall from near where Earth's moon should have been. There is a message beacon orbiting in lunar orbit. The beacon was simple and elegant, clearly human in design. When they activated it, a familiar voice filled the communication channel. It was Jake Morrison, the ambassador who had announced humanity's departure from the Council. If you are hearing this message, you have come looking for us, Morrison's voice said calmly. We appreciate the effort, but humanity has chosen a different path. We have found a better way to live among the stars, one that does not require committees to approve saving lives or forms to be filled out before helping those in need. Vextar felt his crystal body dim with frustration. Where are they? He demanded, as if the recording could hear him. We bear no anger toward the species we once called allies, the message continued. We understand that you were doing what you thought was right, but we could no longer watch good people suffer while bureaucrats debated. We wish you well, but we will not be returning to the old ways. A message ended with coordinates that led to nothing but empty space. When scout ships investigated, they found other beacons with similar messages, each one leading to another set of coordinates that pointed to nowhere. The humans had created a chain of false leads that could keep searchers busy for years, without finding anything useful. Back on the Council worlds, the crisis was reaching a breaking point. Dr. Mexandra of the Science Directorate led a team of the galaxy's brightest minds in trying to reverse engineer human technology from equipment left behind. They had been working for 2 months and had made little progress. The fusion reactor designs make no sense, complained Engineer Korthval as he studied holographic blueprints. The humans used principles that contradict everything we know about. Energy containment. Dr. Mexandra nodded grimly. Human thinking operates differently than ours. They see connections and possibilities that we miss. Their technology is not just advanced, it is alien to our way of understanding the universe. The team had managed to keep some human-designed systems running by following maintenance procedures left behind, but they could not create new systems or fix major problems. It was like trying to perform surgery while wearing thick gloves and looking through cloudy glass. Intelligence. Chief Korthek made an even more disturbing discovery while analyzing the pattern of human departure. In his office deep beneath the Council building, he spread out charts showing every human evacuation site across the galaxy. What he saw made his blood run cold. This was not a sudden decision, he told his assistant. Look at these patterns. The humans began preparing for this departure at least 20 years ago, maybe longer. The evacuation had been too smooth, too complete, too well coordinated to be spontaneous. Human colonies on the edge of known space had been abandoned first, followed by research stations and trade posts in a carefully planned sequence. The humans had been getting ready to leave for decades. Sir, there is something else, his assistant said nervously. We have confirmed reports that several other species left with the humans. The F-Mori healers, the Veil Dancers, and at least 3 minor species have also vanished. Korthek felt sick. The humans had not just left alone. They had convinced other species to join them, species that had grown tired of council bureaucracy and endless debates. How many others were planning to follow? The Galactic Council itself was falling apart. Emergency sessions that had once been held weekly were now daily events as crisis reports flooded in from every sector. The Outer Rim colonies had formed their own defense alliance after the Council admitted it could not protect them from pirates. The agricultural worlds were talking about restricting food shipments to Council worlds unless they received immediate aid. Order, order. High Counselor Zethron called out weakly as another emergency session dissolved into shouting matches. We must work together to solve these problems. Work together? Demanded Governor Dalthus of New Harmony, speaking for the Outer Rim Coalition. Where was this cooperation when our people were dying? We requested help 6 weeks ago, and still have not received a single patrol ship. Senator Kralmuth of the Trade Union waved his tentacles angrily. The trade routes are collapsing. Half the galaxy cannot get basic supplies. We need solutions, not more committees. The Coalition of Outer Rim Worlds delivered an ultimatum that shook the Council to its foundation. Governor Dalthus stood before the Assembly with representatives from 47 independent systems behind her. We give the Council 30 days to restore basic security and supply lines to our worlds, she announced. If you cannot do this, we will formally withdraw from the Council and seek our own solutions. Similar ultimatums began arriving from other sectors. The inner colonies wanted guarantees about food supplies. The industrial worlds demanded protection for their workers. The medical centers needed access to human-developed medicines that the Council could not provide. A black market in human technology emerged almost overnight. Desperate species offered fortunes for any device, data file, or piece of equipment that the humans had left behind. Most of what was sold turned out to be worthless junk, but the bidding wars drove prices so high that entire planetary economies were destabilized. 1 million credits for a human medical scanner, called out Trader Vixton at the infamous Freeport station. 2 million for any functional human computer core. 5 million for a complete human technology database. But authentic human technology was almost impossible to find. The humans had been thorough in their departure, taking everything important with them, and leaving behind only basic equipment that required human knowledge to operate properly. 3 months after humanity's departure, the death toll had reached 2 million people. Entire star systems were going dark as communication networks failed. Pirates controlled shipping lanes that had been safe for centuries. Diseases that had been conquered were returning with deadly force. In his private chamber, High Counselor Zethron stared at reports that painted a picture of galactic civilization in collapse. The species he had dismissed as troublesome rule breakers had been the foundation that everything else was built on. Without them, the grand structure of the Galactic Council was crumbling like a building with its supports removed. Find them, he whispered to himself, knowing that even if they could locate humanity, the proud council could never admit how desperately they were needed. 6 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council held its final vote. High Counselor Zethrin floated in his energy bubble, looking older and more tired than anyone had ever seen him. Around the chamber, only 23 species remained. The others had either withdrawn from the council or simply stopped sending representatives. The motion to dissolve the Galactic Council has been seconded, Zethrin announced, his voice barely above a whisper. All in favor? Hands, tentacles, claws, and appendages rose across the chamber. The vote was unanimous. After 3,000 years of galactic government, the Council was voting itself out of existence. The bureaucracy that had grown so complex, it took weeks to approve emergency aid, was finally admitting defeat. Chancellor, Vextar's crystal body had lost most of its shine. What happens now? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Without central coordination, the galaxy would break apart into regional governments and independent systems. Trade would become more difficult. Defense would be every world for itself. Now we try to survive, replied Governor Dalphys of the Outer Rim Coalition. Her worlds had formed their own government 2 months ago when it became clear the Council could not protect them. Perhaps our children will do better than we did. As the representatives filed out of the Great Chamber for the last time, most expected that galactic civilization was over. The death toll had reached 3 million people. Entire sectors had gone dark. The galaxy was fragmenting into isolated pieces that could barely communicate with each other. But something unexpected happened just as the collapse seemed complete. Every communication device in the former council space began receiving the same transmission on all frequencies. The signal was powerful enough to reach even the most isolated outposts and clear enough to override local interference. Jake Morrison appeared on screens across the galaxy. The former human ambassador looked healthier and more relaxed than anyone remembered seeing him. Behind him, the view showed a beautiful city with architecture that blended human design with styles from species no one recognized. People of the galaxy, Morrison began, his voice calm and friendly. We know you have been looking for us. We know about the crisis that followed our departure. We want you to know that we did not leave out of anger or spite. Across thousands of worlds, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. On the dying industrial world of Mechanicus, Chief Engineer Nalthis gathered his workers around a communication screen. On the plague-ravaged medical world of Sanctum, Dr. Thelmos paused in his desperate research to hear what the humans had to say. "We left because we found something wonderful among the distant stars," Morrison continued. "We discovered other species who had grown tired of endless politics and bureaucracy. Together, we have built something better than what we left behind." Transmission showed images of the human colony in the Andromeda Galaxy. Cities that seemed to grow from the landscape itself housed multiple species working together in harmony. Ships moved between worlds without requiring permissions or travel documents. Medical centers shared knowledge freely without committees deciding who deserved help. "We have learned that civilization does not require complex laws or endless debates," Morrison explained. "It requires only the willingness to help those in need and the courage to do what is right." Intelligence Chief Korthek watched the transmission from his office, taking notes on everything he saw. The humans had not just run away to hide in some distant corner of space. They had traveled to another galaxy entirely and built a new kind of society there. More importantly, they had convinced other species to join them. "We offer a choice to any species willing to leave behind the old ways," Morrison said. "You can join our confederation, but only if you commit to putting the welfare of all sentient life above political considerations. The application process is simple. Demonstrate that your species is willing to help others without waiting for permission." The transmission ended with coordinates to a meeting point at the edge of known space. Any species that wanted to join, the Human Confederation could send a ship there to begin the evaluation process. But the message made it clear that not everyone would be accepted. What the galaxy did not know was that the past 6 months had been a test. Hidden human observers had been watching from the shadows, recording how each species responded to the crisis. Some had risen to the occasion, helping their neighbors and sharing resources freely. Others had retreated into selfishness, hoarding supplies while their neighbors suffered. The Ethmori healers had scored highest on the human evaluation. When plague struck the Rigel system, they had sent every available medical ship to help, even though it left their own worlds vulnerable. The Centauri traders had shared their remaining food supplies with starving colonies, instead of selling them for massive profits. But other species had failed the test badly. The Zalonian Empire had refused to help anyone outside their own territory. The Arcanian Federation had actually tried to profit from the crisis by selling basic supplies at inflated prices. These species would not receive invitations to join. The new Confederation. Dr. Thelmos was among the first to respond to Morrison's offer. He loaded his remaining medical supplies onto a ship and headed for the coordinates, hoping that the humans could help him save the millions still dying from diseases that human medicine had once controlled. "Why are you leaving?" asked his assistant as they prepared to depart Sanctum. "Because I became a doctor to save lives, not to fill out forms," Dr. Thelmos replied. "If the humans have found a way to practice medicine without bureaucracy interfering, then that is where I belong." The Centauri Republic voted unanimously to send a delegation to meet with the humans. Their representative, Captain Linder, carried with her a complete record of how her people had shared their resources during the crisis. She hoped it would be enough to prove their worthiness. Chief Engineer Nalthis was more conflicted. His world desperately needed the humans to return and fix their failing power systems. But the human message had been clear. They were not coming back to the old galaxy. The only way to get their help was to join them in their new home. "Pack everything we can carry," he told his engineering teams. "We are going to Andromeda." Years later, the remaining species in the old galaxy had learned to work together out of necessity. The crisis had taught them valuable lessons about cooperation and mutual aid. They formed smaller, more efficient governments that could actually respond to emergencies. Trade resumed, though it was more limited than before. Medical knowledge was shared freely, because everyone remembered what happened when it was hoarded, but the galaxy was forever changed. Populations were smaller, technology was less advanced, and life was harder than it had been during the human era. The species that remained often looked up at the stars and wondered what life was like in Andromeda, where the humans and their allies had built their new civilization. In Andromeda, Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of her ship as it jumped to hyperspace. She was leading a rescue mission to save survivors from a collapsing star system. There were no committees to consult, no forms to file, no permissions to seek. There were only people in need and people willing to help. Set course for the evacuation zone, she ordered. Full speed ahead. As her ship raced toward the crisis, Hayes smiled and spoke the unofficial motto of their new confederation. Sometimes walking away is the only way to find the path forward.